I think companies that really take on this role of futurizing will give themselves a competitive advantage moving forward. And I think especially on that, just on the technology piece, I really see a future in which everyone is an augmented worker. And people call them techno workers or augmented workers or AI workers or cyborgs, whatever word you want to use. But I really see all of us having personal AI assistants or co-pilots in whatever industry we're working in.
Welcome to This is Digital, a podcast brought to you by West Monroe. Join us as we talk to leading experts about bringing the digital mindset to your organization.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Season 2 of This is Digital, a podcast about leading with digital to win in the marketplace. I'm your host, Rissa Redden, Partner and Chief Marketing Officer here at West Monroe. West Monroe is a digital services firm. We are thinkers and makers who bring hands-on experience and technical know-how to get things done and to deliver lasting value. On This is Digital, we talk to experts about how to go about not just doing digital, but being digital. Throughout this season, we'll be sharing the biggest challenges and opportunities businesses are facing this year and answering questions from listeners like you on topics ranging from the evolving workplace to cost optimization in a slow growth environment. Today's hot topic is an exciting one: the convergence of the next generation of leaders and AI in the workplace. As new ideas, technologies, and employees enter the workforce, how is that shaping the future? How are companies learning from and adapting to Millennial and Gen Z workers? What impact will AI and emerging technologies have on the future of work? With that in mind, I'm thrilled to introduce our guest. Please join me in welcoming Allie K. Miller. Allie is a top artificial intelligence leader, advisor, and investor with a wealth of experience in the field. She has led multiple global AI initiatives at two of the 5 largest cloud providers in the world, Amazon and IBM. And with nearly 1.4 million followers on LinkedIn, Allie is one of the most followed AI influencers in the world. In addition to her professional achievements, Allie is also a national ambassador for AAAS and a public policy advocate, working to promote the responsible development and deployment of AI. She has been recognized with numerous awards, including LinkedIn Top Voice, Chief in Tech's Top 100 Women in Tech to Watch, and Award Magazine's Top 50 Women in Tech. And a statue, might I add, at the Smithsonian, which is incredible. We are thrilled to have her join us today to share her insights and experiences with all of you. Allie, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. Allie, before we start, I would love it if you could share a bit more about your background. Where did your passion from all things tech and AI come from?
I'm lucky to have a mom that was a programmer. And so I think probably early on, I was getting a lot more math and computers than the average person. I was always taking extra math classes. I was a math nerd. I went into college thinking I was going to be a math major and ended up doing machine learning research while in college and stayed in the tech space, but had kind of left AI for a little bit. And it wasn't until grad school, which was, about 10 years ago, I was talking to one of my mentors, Adam Grant. And this is going to sound very bleak, and I'm sorry to kick off season 2 with such a low note, but it was about 10 years ago, and I went into his office and I told him that AI was going to come like a tidal wave and people were going to drown at the pace that things were going at then. And so basically for the last 10 years, I've dedicated my career and my life to artificial intelligence and working with enterprises, Fortune 500, startups, researchers, public policy advocates, to really build toward better AI, better meaning, good for humanity and right for what we want our society to be. And, now I'm excited to share more of that with the world, whether it's on social media or otherwise.
Well, and as a deep technologist, it's interesting to me that you're also a very strong communicator. Some might say that that's an unusual combination. Do you think that that's unusual?
I have to say I'm not an engineer. I've coded back in the day, and my roles at Amazon and IBM were technical. But there are so many problems that AI has that actually have nothing to do with engineering. And it has to do much more with running a team, building up a culture that is able to innovate and experiment, having influence, working with, many different stakeholders. I don't know whether it's a rare combination. I feel like I've worked with tons of great communicators, but I do think that it's like an interesting call to arms to say AI needs everyone, and that includes people with this interpersonal skill set.
Which is a really interesting statement to make, that it's really inclusive then. It's how do we bring everybody's skills and abilities to bear on this incredibly exciting area? That's amazing. Shifting into talent, I mean, you talked a little bit about culture, and I'm so fascinated to hear more from you on how do you create that culture of risk-taking, and which is innovation, right? That you can't have innovation without risk-taking. But at West Monroe, our mission is to develop the next generation of leaders. And so it's certainly something that's near and dear to my heart. But as you think about your passion for mentoring the next generation, what are some thoughts that you have on companies that get it right, or what type of company is getting it right?
Yeah, I talk about this thing, culture 2.0, and I think we've like graduated past the point of this like Instagram workplace and Disneyland workplace, which was, you rewarded your employees with ice cream bars or nap pods, and that was like an era of workplace that people were sharing and really happy with their friends. And I think that those benefits are no longer serving employees. And I think people are really looking for a more supportive work environment. So, when I think of culture 2.0, I think of 5 things, and I'm happy to go into any of these deeper.
Please.
The first is really the ability to support our whole selves and not just our work self. And I think COVID really brought that to light. We might have kids that need us, or sick parents, or our car might break down, and that affects who we are in the workplace. I think the second, which you've already mentioned, is really building an inclusive environment, and the two of those combined really support psychological safety at work. And I feel my most risk forward and risk open when I feel psychologically safe at work. The third is, flexibility. And that could be a hybrid workplace. That could be a whole bunch of things. I also think about futurizing and equipping workers with AI and tools that they actually need to do their job, right? So these are all components in culture 2.0 that I'm thinking about. And that last one, going back to nap pods, is really benefits that actually support people. And that might look like daycare, that might look like mental health support, that might look like executive coaching. I mean, it's a variety of things, but it's things that people really need in Maslow's hierarchy of needs that allow us to be more risky, to be more innovative, to have more creative ideas.
It's interesting. In listening to you talk about that, I was reminded of on Fridays, a custom that we have at West Monroe is people who have a charity that is a passion of theirs will have a mini fundraiser, and it's each Friday. And it's an opportunity for each person to bring to the fore what they care about. And I think that's also, something that's purpose is so important, and to have a shared sense of purpose, I think, is really critical. And to have somebody support your passion feels really, really important.
Even just having time carved out at work to come together and share. I'll give you 2 other examples from startups. I have a friend who his entire startup has a Tuesday share time of just an interesting article you read, an interesting research paper that you want to bring together. And so that, again, it's psychological safety, but it's also purpose, coming together and finding communal interests that people have, I think is great. And then there's another startup that was created by the founder of Siri, and he had Magic Fridays. He had magicians come and perform. He had his employees learn magic and perform on Fridays. And again, that is getting out of your comfort zone, having a growth mindset that you could learn a new skill. It doesn't have to be incredibly intellectual and technical and all these things. It could just also be fun.
Fun is important. Gallup research shows that nearly all millennials own a smartphone, and we refer to this cohort as the digital generation. According to a report that came out recently, 72% of Gen Zers say that they are open to using technology to automate repetitive or administrative tasks, freeing up more time for creative work. Does this ring true based on your experience?
I don't know what the stat would look like for non-Gen Z, but it does ring true. I actually had a poll that I posted on Twitter and Instagram asking, has ChatGPT become an integral part of your workflow? That was question 1. And question 2 was, would you work for a company that did not allow you to use ChatGPT or similar AI tools? And I think what we're stepping into this year and next is something that I call digital whiplash, which is basically in your personal life, you're able to use ChatGPT to create interview questions, or you're able to use it to plan your day, or you're able to use transcription software to take better notes. We're enabling ourselves outside of work to do these unbelievable, highly creative, highly productive, highly efficient things. And then all of a sudden we come into the workplace and we're using a spreadsheet that's not even connected to the cloud. And so that delta is not only big now, it is only growing. And so companies that don't allow you to leverage tech to, you had said, automate repetitive tasks, they're going to fall behind. And that poll, just to let you know, this is non-scientific, and I'm asking relatively technical people that follow me, but 70% of people said that they would not work for a company that did not allow them to use ChatGPT or other similar AI tools. 70%.
I would love to get your perspective on this, because I feel like these new tools really put the focus on the highest and best use of time. And we all want to honor the time that we have. And so, of course, you would want these tools that get you 60% of the way done on a project, and then it's an opportunity to come in and be creative and add the creativity really to the mix. But what's your perspective on that? I feel like there's time saving, certainly, but what is it that appeals to people about these new tools?
First, not to get overly philosophical, but I do think that this generation of AI is literally changing how we think about time. And I mean time it takes to complete a task, time it takes to produce a product, time it takes to scale something to 100 million users. The concept of time is, and I feel this literally in the last couple months, it's been warping in my head. And it is a very weird thing to be alive and working through this, but I'm still thinking through what time means. And as companies are thinking through 4-day work weeks or more flexible work life, I just think time is getting warped a bit. Generative AI, it's only a subset of AI. There's plenty of amazing AI use cases that have nothing to do with generative AI. But generative AI in particular allows us, yes, to create net new writing or images or videos or structured data. And I think that it being a first draft of something is a great use case and has honestly helped me get over a lot of writer's block. But I think as I really map it out for the next 2 or 3 years, what generative AI is doing is bringing down the effort it takes to execute. And I mean that in terms of time, people, money, resources. Like every bit of CapEx and OpEx is coming down to be able to execute on anything. And early stage ChatGPT is showing that for creative output. But I would add that in for products that might be created, businesses that might be created, new cities that could be launched. Like it is much bigger than we currently see it today.
And when you make the distinction between generative AI and AI, help our listeners. I mean, when you are thinking about that distinction, what does that mean? Or how do you think about generative AI differently than other AI?
So AI as a whole is just a computer or system attempting to do a human-like thing. It could be classifying images. So whenever you use Google Photos or Amazon Photos and you ask the system, show me photos of Allie Miller or a woman in a red shirt at the beach, that image getting brought up being a woman at the beach is not generative AI. It's just computer vision. And so there's tons of AI, computer vision, natural language processing, something like linear regression, like predicting house prices. Like there are tons of AI use cases that are not generative. It's looking at past data and it's predicting some next thing. Generative AI, ChatGPT being one very popular example, but so is DALL-E and a bunch of others, are really about AI creating something net new that hasn't been seen. And again, it could be multimodal, it could be across images or structured data or whatever, but it's creating something net new. And so in that housing pricing example, it would more be designing brand new houses that have never been seen. And it's, again, a subset of AI.
A Fast Company article that was written a while back from Megan Raudebush with a startup called KeepWith, which is focused on networking. And the article title was Why You Need a Mentor Who's Younger Than You. I'd love your reaction to that. Is that important in this day and age? Is it more important because of technology? Tell me more.
So first, I have mentors from every generation, and I think mentorship is a two-way street. I would not be where I am today were it not for the unbelievable mentors who took a chance on me, who saw something in me, who championed me, who taught me something new. And so I guess I'll even take a step back and think about this from a first principles perspective, which is, why do we even mentor others? What is the purpose of mentorship? And I think it's to improve society on a global scale and to improve our learning curve as a collective group. And when I think of okay, how do you improve learning curves? It's the same thing in AI. It's learning from the past and gaining new perspective and generating something new. And you cannot learn from the past if you're not studying history and talking to, previous generations. I go on YouTube and I watch videos of centenarians giving life advice. It's some of my favorite content online. But I also really reach out to Gen Z and even Gen Alpha to say, hey, what stores are you shopping at? How did you make that decision? Who are your friends? How are you talking to them? Do you use Be Real? What do you think about it? And I think it's so important to hear that perspective because it's new, it's fresh. It makes you think of things in new ways. I'm constantly inspired in AI through things outside of AI. I might read an article about manufacturing. I might read an article about fashion. I might read an article about quantum computing, and that will influence how I think about the future of AI. And I also do that through conversations with people with Gen Z all the way to, boomers.
Well, and I love the centenarians, and it's fascinating.
You should watch
to me
those
too,
YouTube videos. They're.
I gotta. Yeah, that's my take. One of my takeaways so far today
they basically
is to find these videos.
The same thing, which is spend time with people that you care about, build meaningful relationships, and don't care what people think about you. I feel like those are the top two takeaways.
Well, and I do think, there's certainly a body of research that supports longevity is tied to connection and to the people that you surround yourself with. And it's such a powerful reminder of that. Okay, switching gears now, I want to talk a little bit about Workplace 2.0. As technology, tools, mindsets, working environments are evolving, what do you think about the future of the workplace? What will the future of work look like?
So every piece that I mentioned about Culture 2.0, I do think is going to grow. I think workplaces will continue to be flexible. I think we'll continue to support our whole selves. And I think companies that really take on this role of futurizing will give themselves a competitive advantage moving forward. And I think especially on that, just on the technology piece, I really see a future in which everyone is an augmented worker. And people call them techno workers or augmented workers or AI workers or cyborgs, whatever word you want to use. But I really see all of us having personal AI assistants or co-pilots in whatever industry we're working in. Right now, ChatGPT is just being used on individuals. There's no real personalization. And you can imagine that there will be ChatGPT for business, ChatGPT for dentists. This will really be verticalized and exposed to all different industries and then personalized to each person.
According to a report from Adobe, 72% of young workers expect flexible working hours. 81% say that the ability to work remotely is important to them. We've seen companies now use the phrase cloud-based workers or hubs. You recently landed in New York after 2.5 years of working remotely from 70 cities around the world. What did you learn from that experience?
Oh, God. I worked from 70 cities, 12 states, 8 countries. And I think the first thing I learned was you only need about 2 pairs of pants to really live your life. And that is, like, I think so many people are probably overbuying. I had a big closet, all these things, and you really learn what matters. And I know I joke about having a minimalist closet, but you really learn what matters to you. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from hosting AI dinners in Miami or meeting with women in AI in Paris, my big takeaway is that everyone right now is really questioning the default and thinking about what belonging means to them. And I talked with so many people about how they're building community in their city and how technology is enforcing that or taking away from that. And, I have now made friends all over the world that are really bringing new perspectives. And I think, the last thing I learned from this listening tour was that everyone really has a unique perspective to share. I lived in San Francisco for years, and it's an unbelievable city for tech innovation, but can be quite the bubble. And I think breaking out and having this exposure to so many cultures, you really start to appreciate what it means to build a global business and how important it is to engage your community, your coworkers, your peers, and actually listen to them.
Well, and I love that phrase, questioning the default, I think is such an interesting one. And I love that. And I'm a huge, of course, I think everybody is a Brené Brown fan, and her definition of belonging as compared to fitting in, I think is an interesting one that I think historically, when we think about work, you would go to work to fit in and to get a suit or to get the briefcase or to get the things. And now it's much more about belonging and bringing your whole self to the conversation, which I love. What new job titles or new roles do you think will emerge in the future of work?
I was thinking about this, and the World Economic Forum in 2020 predicted that in 2025, we would have a job loss of 85 million jobs and a job gain of 97 million jobs. And yeah, it maybe is a little out of date, but I think that I can confidently think through 3 things. One is that every single job will be impacted by AI. So there will be doctors that use AI, lawyers that use AI, teachers that use AI. Every single role will be impacted. The second is that I think some roles will be partially displaced or entirely displaced by AI. And the third is growth. Very obvious growth is in machine learning jobs like machine learning engineer or research scientist or head of AI. And then there's this other component, which is what you're asking about, which is net new jobs that we do not yet know about. And I went to college before Instagram was a thing. Social media managers did not exist. SEO managers barely existed. Growth hackers didn't exist. And so I've been thinking through okay, what do I see as potential new AI jobs? And I'll throw out a few here, but I would love your reaction. I would love to hear if you have other ideas too, because I think everyone has a voice here. But there's a rise of AI avatars and the ability for any company to have an AI personality for their brand. And so I could see a role of AI brand manager. I also think that the future of AI is personalized, predictive, and proactive. We will be taking actions before something happens. We're already doing that now with predictive maintenance, but I do think that will grow. And so I could see a role of head of prediction or head of decision making. There are some people right now that hold a role, head of decision science. Cassie Kozyrkov is the chief decision scientist at Google. I can't name too many others, and I really see that becoming a much larger role. I could see, dozens of AI roles that all are thinking about what does it mean to build, what does it mean to act. So those are a few ideas, but would love to hear if you have others as well.
I'm reminded of a conversation that I had a couple of years ago, and this was about algorithms, and when you build the algorithm, are you likely to build in your own biases into that algorithm? And I feel like there is something similar when you take it to the next level with AI of what assumptions are you building in, and when you predict, if you're starting from a belief system, how does that influence prediction? I think it becomes a really interesting conversation. And how do we remove the bias but keep the benefit from some of these tools as we move forward, I think is a really fascinating conversation.
There's an interesting piece of bias, right? Which is bias, can mean several things, but it really means that an AI system is thinking in a way that the human thought, and that it is skewed in a way that, doesn't represent what should happen. But that also is the same sort of framework for personalization, right? Like an AI that is built for me, is personalized, is biased to me. And
right.
I see a future in which we have AI that is value-oriented and goal-oriented, that you get to give it. I have an Allie constitution that I live by. I have my own set of values. And the teams that I've run, we had our own set of tenets and our own set of goals and values. And then the companies that I worked at had our own set of values and our own set of tenets. And so I could see a world in which these AI models, these systems, are taking into account each person's individual wants, needs, goals, and then factoring in that of the team, and factoring in that of the company, and factoring in that of the customer. And that is, an interesting lean of this same sort of, bias question, where some personalization is good and wanted, and of course some is entirely unwanted and should be stopped.
100%. I took a class at University of Chicago, the Booth School of Business, with Richard Thaler, who has since gone on to win a Nobel Prize. And that was my first exposure to biases and to think about what they represent, and that it is how people make decisions. And it's not always fair, but we have these biases for all sorts of great reasons. When you are overwhelmed with information, it is how you make decisions often. But it's an interesting one to think about, that in some instances it's really positive, and in some instances it could potentially be negative. And how do we navigate the implications? Because it's the consequences that become important to think about.
And I think companies right now are thinking through their risk mitigation strategies. Like, this is one thing that I'm consulting with companies on, and helping their boards and their executive leadership teams really think through, what does it mean to incorporate AI into all of our workflows? And so there's like obvious risk mitigation of the deployment state, right? Maybe you test small, you have customer feedback, you have teams and budget constantly allocated to it to be able to iterate. There's also obvious things in the build stage, right? You involve legal, you involve finance, you involve sales. Like, you have customer conversations early on, you red team it. What I think a lot of people forget in this risk mitigation stage is what happens before you even build the product. And this is in hiring. This is who you have on your team. This is back to what we were talking about psychological safety and inclusion. Who is not at that table, who is a big percent of your customer cohort that needs to have a voice in that room, and thinking about what roles or, gender, ethnicity, languages. There's so much that needs to be factored in before you even start writing a line of code.
Completely agree. At West Monroe, we put a real emphasis around multidisciplinary teams.
That's great.
And you need different perspectives. And I think that the question, though, that was running through my mind when you were giving that example is really around sequencing. That how do you create the sequence of who needs to know what and when? Because you certainly don't want something to be built and then you realize that there's a legal issue or it's against a regulatory something or other.
Totally.
And how do you think about the sequencing? Because you don't want everybody in the room at the same time necessarily, but you need those perspectives represented.
Yeah, I think, this is such a big topic. There's if everyone closes their eyes listening to this and can picture the old school, like, waterfall Gantt chart, I think it can feel really easy to think about things in this perfect chronological order. And one thing that we really talk about in machine learning development and the engineering teams that I've run in terms of our development lifecycle is that it is a cycle. Every single time that we're building a product, it is extremely iterative. And it's not this perfect line where something gets deployed and done and then you move on and on to the next. you're always thinking about what perspectives aren't included. How are we thinking about our tenants? What should our strategy be? And so some of the topics that I'm working with companies on right now are like culture and organizational structure and communication. What Slack channels do you have set up? What biweekly meetings are set up? What processes do you have in place to even test this new software? Do you have a procurement team that is ready to test this stuff? There's going to be AI for enterprise apps rolled out definitely in the next couple months. And I don't know if people are even ready to have that cycle conversation when they don't have the people and processes in place. And so to your question, I think you have to start somewhere in that circle, right? I think a lot of people are afraid to start because they don't know where. But certainly starting and then constantly iterating on it and keeping it small, having that sort of product management approach to this, I think is a really big advantage for companies.
We talk a lot about that, about how do you move from the project mindset to the product mindset.
That's great.
Because you need that iteration, right? You need that cycle, the cycle that it goes on forever. Allie, I believe that you are a huge proponent of executive coaching, and I'm curious, what has been your experience with coaching to date?
I'm a huge proponent of executive coaching, and I got my first executive coaching about 10 years ago in grad school, and Wharton gave us executive coaches for free. That was provided by our institution, and I only took advantage of that because it was free, and I wish that more companies offered that. And even, Amazon, I got a free executive coach through Amazon as well. And she has completely changed my life. She has changed how I thought about team leadership, how I think about self-advocacy. I worked in artificial intelligence at Amazon, and my entire role was focused on AI. But there was this other problem that I saw and wanted to fix while there. And I ended up partnering up with someone not in my org, not even in my business division. And we created a net new program for Amazon for 1.3 million employees. And I really leaned on my executive coach to figure out, how do I get through this? How do I push through this? Who should I work with? And just having someone who's had that aggregated learning from her speaking with 200 other executives in this space and feeding me that insight is so incredible. I want everyone to have a personalized coach, which AI opens up.
Yes, it absolutely does. What advice do you have for recruiting the best tech talent?
I guess I'll mention three things. The first is getting really clear on what you actually need in this role. Every single role that I hired at Amazon was the first of its kind in the world. And so I think to our previous discussion, a lot of these roles are going to be net new, and you have to think just as much about the skill set as the mindset that you want someone to come in with. So clarity on job description and clarity on the person that you're searching for. The second is actually meeting these people and speaking to them where they are and engaging with them to say, what do you want most out of this role? And making it almost like a two-way street. The third, which I can speak from personal experience, is hunting them down on social media. I've hired people off of LinkedIn. I've hired people off of Twitter. I've hired people off of Instagram. And these are people that are now rated top of the org, some of the most brilliant people I've worked with. You have to, my sister refers to it as a truffle pig. You have to enable your hiring managers to hunt out this talent. And I have grabbed from other orgs within our companies. I have found people on Twitter. You just need to get creative about where to find these people. It can't just be from posting a job description and assuming that people will come to you. It just doesn't work like that anymore.
Well, and I think you raised something interesting about it being new. And how do you attract somebody to something that they've never seen before? And is that your storytelling ability? What have you leveraged in order to paint the picture for somebody of what this new thing could look like for them?
I think technical people especially can get they over-index on the technical component of a job. And they'll talk about specific algorithms or specific technologies that people will get to work on. And I think that only goes so far because tech is moving so quickly that soon becomes out of date. And so more than talking about a specific technology or project that I'm working on, I think about it in terms of team culture, psychological safety, inclusivity, all the things we've talked about, team culture, and purpose. And I think so many people are picking jobs now based on what they can get done and what sort of impact they can have on the world. And, I have knock on wood, I have 100% hit rate on giving people job offers and them accepting. And I think that really comes down to speaking to their goal set and giving them a purpose and carving out a role that is meaningful and giving them a sense of belonging inside of a much larger company. But making sure that they know that they have the creativity to explore in a certain set of parameters, but that there will be purpose and impact, and they're not just a cog in a machine.
You recently said that one of the biggest topics you're advising enterprises on right now is how to manage and involve your organization, business, and teams through rapid change. Can you talk a little bit about how you approach your clients? How do you advise for change?
I think a lot of companies, especially for the last 10 years, have been focused on AI-ifying their company and their, thought processes. And I think that is the wrong approach. It should never be technology-led. So I think one of the ways that I'm really working with companies now is starting from first principles. What is your company doing? Who is your customer? What impact are you having? And what is something that you think could potentially be fixed with technology, whether that's AI or not? And so starting from first principles has always kind of led me to a much better solution in the end, and not starting with technology. That's one. I think about it in terms of, organizational structure and culture and communication and processes and all these things. But I think we're in the era of the COO, and so much is happening from an operational perspective right now that all of these conversations end up coming back to, okay, we've talked about it with one team or one project or one whatever. How do we operationalize that at scale? And how are we going to scale that out to your customers? Like, scale is the big question. And ethical scale, by the way, is the big question. So, it really, really starts from that first principles question. And again, I know we talk about that it shouldn't be project-led, but you do have to start small. You do have to start maybe with one team or with one project. But the vision should always be to scale this out.
On a previous podcast episode, I was chatting with Betsy Ziegler at 1871, which is a significant private incubator in Chicago. And we were talking about how there is such importance for defining the problem that you are trying to solve. Is there an opportunity to do more teaching of that? And what, do we need more discipline or more rigor around defining the problem? I see you nodding your head. It sounds like you might agree with that comment.
I think this goes back to time being warped. I've had CEOs come up to me of billion-dollar companies and say, we need to move fast, we need to move fast, we need to move fast. And what does fast even mean, first of all? But it's this
great question.
Balance of moving at a pace that makes sense for the business, the problem, and the customer set that you have. And I think especially for the next couple months, we are in a state where you have to not move too fast and not move too slowly. And it's this big question of, you want to innovate, you don't want to be left behind, but you don't want to break things and fail loudly to your customers. Like, there's scaled AI and scaled technology comes with a certain amount of responsibility. And scale right now is so big that moving too fast, I think, early era Silicon Valley was praised, and that needs to be questioned right now. And so thinking through that speed question and to figure out what are our actual goals really does start with defining the problem and figuring out, how is that problem solved now? Why is that problem even a problem? Should it be fixed? Can it be fixed? I mean, there's so many other questions in between before you even jump into a solution.
Well, and I love that because I feel like I've had a number of conversations recently around there's a difference between activity and impact. And what's the goal here? If the goal is impact, how can we be more targeted, or how can we simplify, or how do we radically simplify something? Because I feel like in times of uncertainty, there can be that swirl or the spinning that can occur because people feel the need to do something. Yes. And I feel it feels similar to me around speed, that if you're just speeding to speed, it's a race to nowhere, potentially.
There's an equation.
You're just going to get there faster.
Yeah, there's an equation for like productivity that I think about that AI is certainly accelerating. And I think a lot of people sadly find personal value and worth through action and activity and working. And that if you provide people technology that relieves you of some work hours, what is going to happen to those empty work hours? Are you going to work more? Are you going to increase your impact? Are you going to do more yoga and sing and write poetry? Like, having a vacuum of time really calls into question how companies are going to fill that. It's an interesting question. It's one that I'm still thinking through and working with. Every company is going to have their own answer, but it is so interesting to think through how time and impact and productivity are all related.
100%. And I think too that, where is the time for reflection when people are going from meeting to meeting to meeting, or they're going from the task list is, they're moving, down the list, that there is such importance around carving out space to think or to get bored, because I'm convinced that when you get bored, that's when creativity really sparks.
I can't imagine you ever being bored. I'm never bored. I sometimes just like sit for 10 minutes just to think about where my mind goes. But yeah, I always advocated to my teams to carve out time in their calendars for reflection, for team optimization, right? Like, we would have meetings maybe about once a month that it would just be what's not working. And we would have these share sessions to say, do we need a new perspective? Do we need to switch what roles people are taking? Do we need to add in a new region of coverage? Like, it was like complaint hour. And that is so important to keep optimizing your team. And again, having that psychological safety for people to tell me what I was not doing well allowed our team to be the top performing team. Like, that is how innovation keeps moving forward.
When you're thinking about a discussion of what's not working, how do you ensure that you have that psychological safety? I mean, by its nature, right? How do you raise that in a way that feels comfortable for people? Because we all need to solve problems. And how do you divorce the problem from the person?
So first, psychological safety is built in one-on-ones and group efforts and your own personal actions. So when I was meeting with my team one-on-one, I had incredible senior leaders. They knew what they were doing. And so I trusted them with a certain level of autonomy to run what they were tasked to do. I still wanted to understand what their goals were at this company on this team. And being able as a manager to map all of those goals together and to really listen and to take that feedback and to say, hey, as a team, we're stronger than each person individually. Everyone seeing where their impact went and seeing that their goals mattered and seeing that I knew their kids' names. I saved their birthdays in my calendar. I sent a guy caviar when he closed like one of the greatest sales of all time. Like, it was just unbelievable building up this org of about, 100 people. And that starts with one-on-one. As a team, carving out time to have reflection, the first 10 minutes was always really just thinking through what is going well, what's not. I made sure to have every single person speak. And then again, going back to first principles, what values are our team really focused on? And how am I as a leader embedding that in how I work? If I tell them not to work on vacation, am I sending them emails from my own vacation? Those sorts of actions, leaders have to be really conscious about being visible role models for their team. And so all of those things combined really form psychological safety. And again, being someone who can take criticism, I'm still learning that, but psychological safety is also a process. It is earned and can be quickly lost. And being a leader that is open to feedback and open to change is huge.
Allie K. Miller, my final question for you is one that we like to ask all of our guests.
Okay.
What does digital mean to you?
I'm much more focused on when to be digital. And I think that there's this very, we've talked so much today about purpose. And I think AI-ifying or digitizing or cloudifying, is pointless without impact and without a customer in mind that you are truly trying to help improve their life. And so I think, I'm more thinking about digital with a purpose and what is that North Star that teams or companies are really going for, and how are you setting up goals or team culture or guardrails or parameters to really help everyone lead toward what that means and making sure that people are digital along the way, but toward a purpose.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Allie K. Miller, what a treat it has been to chat with you today. Thank you.
This is great. I appreciated it.
Thanks for listening to This is Digital. If you enjoyed today's show, please follow or subscribe on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget to leave us a review. For more information on This is Digital, visit westmonroe.com/thisisdigital.